Institutionally racist, homophobic and misogynistic, a damning review of Britain's largest police force. Baroness Casey's report into the Met Police, triggered by the murder of Sarah Everard, condemns a culture that allowed predatory and unacceptable behaviour to flourish and calls for a complete overhaul of the force.
The system is failing. Discrimination and prejudice is writ large. So these things need to be changed in order for all of the public to have confidence in the Metropolitan Police.
The boss of the Met, Sir Mark Rowley, said he was sorry for the failings, but said he doesn't believe the problems are institutional. So what next for the force that has faced calls to reform for decades? Also tonight.
No COVID rules were broken.
Boris Johnson admits he misled Parliament with that statement, but claims it was done in good faith as he lays out his defence ahead of tomorrow's Partygate hearing. The man accused of fatally shooting 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool gives evidence in court for the first time. Gwyneth Paltrow in a real-life drama as she faces a civil claim over an alleged hit-and-run while skiing, and a £14 billion bump in the road, the cost of fixing the country's pothole problem.
This is the ITV Evening News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening. The very future of the Metropolitan Police is in doubt tonight after a damning report found it to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Britain's biggest police force was labelled broken and rotten to its core and has suffered a collapse in both public trust and support. The report by Baroness Casey was commissioned following the outrage and shock at the rape and murder of Sarah Everard by Met officer Wayne Couzens. It found many other women were let down, including those serving in its own ranks who face routine sexism. It listed shocking examples of discrimination, misconduct and abuse of power stemming from a deep-seated boys' club culture. And Baroness Casey warned that if a number of key changes are not made, the force could be broken up to make improvements. Here's Sejal Carrier on the Met's darkest day.
Wayne Couzens and David Carrick, two of the most heinous criminals to wear the uniform, but they were far from alone. Face after face of those we should trust, but all of these Metropolitan Police officers have been convicted of crimes since 2021. In a force that's also guilty of institutional misogyny, homophobia and racism, branded as being rotten to the core, unable to police itself. And tonight, no guarantees there aren't more rapists and killers hiding in its ranks.
The system is failing. You should take seriously that your rank and file cannot be guaranteed to have integrity. You should take seriously that victims, women, vulnerable victims, children, the people we're supposed to protect above and beyond anybody else, you can't guarantee it and you don't do it. And then on top of that, you run an organisation where discrimination and prejudice is writ large.
Her report paints an excoriating picture of the force, who, it said, underprotects and over-polices black communities, who are more likely to be stopped and searched, handcuffed, battened and tasered, that has allowed predatory and unacceptable behaviour to flourish. Of rape, one officer told the Review, the detection rate is so low, you may as well say it's legal in London. A force that has deep-seated homophobia within it. One openly gay officer said he'd seen messages where colleagues joked about stopping and searching him whilst off duty. He told the Review, "I'm scared of the police. I don't trust my own organisation. I will vary the route I walk to avoid walking past police officers when I'm not at work." The boss, Sir Mark Rowley, has spent much of his 6 months as Commissioner saying sorry for his force's failings, but he doesn't accept Baroness Casey's use of the term institutional.
I accept her diagnosis about the racism, misogyny and homophobia in the organisation, and also that we have these systemic failings, management failings and cultural failings. I understand her use of the term institutional. It's not a term I use myself.
Yet this year-long review condemns the systemic failures within the force too. Discrimination, it found, that was rampant across its ranks. One Sikh officer spoke of his beard being trimmed, another had his turban put in a shoebox, and a Muslim officer found bacon in his boots. And rape cases being dropped because DNA evidence was destroyed in broken fridges and freezers.
There are systemic and chronic problems with leadership and culture. And what we need to do is change the culture, change the practice and change the systems in place.
This is not the first report, and it likely won't be the last. The Met was described as institutionally racist after Stephen Lawrence's racially motivated killing 30 years ago. 2 decades later, another report into the murder of Daniel Morgan in 1987 found the Met was institutionally corrupt. These new findings not surprising to his brother.
The oversight of the police has been terrible for decades. You know, the answer to the Home Office, and the Home Office has been useless for decades. So it's not surprised that all of this has suddenly bubbled up, you know, after all these years.
Baroness Casey says all her recommendations should be implemented, including independent experts overhauling the force. Otherwise, it should be broken up if it cannot affect change quickly enough. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
One of the report's most damning findings is the misogyny in the Met and how it's failed to protect women and girls. And it's not just victims and their families who've been let down, it is also female officers within their own ranks, as our correspondent John Ray now reports.
Jan was a brilliant mother. She done everything for her children.
For the family of Jan Mustafa, the Met's failings aren't systemic or institutional. They're personal.
In their eyes, because Jan was vulnerable, she was no one to them.
She was missing for a year. The police's failure to find her might speak of an overworked force, but also, say her family, a service that didn't care.
For 1 year, I can't tell you one good thing that they done for us. The most popular, annoying word we would get told, it's on our to-do list. That's all they used to say.
Her body was eventually found, stored in the home of a known sex offender.
There's a freezer here that I want to get into. It's locked, but...
Her family believed that if the police had done their job, she might still be alive today.
Why is it, do you think, that detectives didn't take her disappearance seriously?
I think there's a lot of misogyny here with our case. There was victim blaming, we think. Obviously, Jan's race probably will come into that now as well. And it's just not fair. Like, she was our loved one.
Nusrit Methab knows the system from inside the ranks.
You know, I was vilified and I was ostracised.
Once a Met high flyer, she's now suing them over racist and sexist abuse.
There can be no more excuses. It's time for change. And if the Met can't reform, and I think Casey's made that quite clear, then it has to be disbanded and other options explored.
But here's just one measure of the challenge. At present rates of recruitment, it will be 30 years before there's a gender balance in the force, a decade longer to reflect the diversity of the people the Met serves.
Policing by public consent. It is the founding principle of the British system. But what happens when confidence in the force is so corroded that trust begins to collapse? That is the central question posed by the Casey report. Does your family still trust the police?
No, I don't have no trust in them anymore. Who do you go to? No one.
For the family of Jan Mustafa and for every Londoner, the police need a better answer. John Ray, ITV News.
You saw Sejal Carrier's report at the beginning of the programme. She joins us now. And Sejal, the Met Commissioner's response to the shameful report has faced really strong criticism. It begs the question, what next for the force? Can it reform?
Yes, this is a hefty 363-page report, and as we've been hearing, it's filled with very serious criticism. And in it, Baroness Casey says it's up to the force's leadership to get a grip of the situation. She says she wants to see them, as she puts it, to clean up the Met. Her fear is that they won't do that. What they will do is what they've always done, is use a pick and mix approach. So implement the changes they want to, ignore those that don't want to. That won't do, she says. Wholesale change is what's needed. And if necessary, independent experts should come in and enact those recommendations. Those recommendations, by the way, are everything from vetting to training to ongoing management of people to their misconduct system. And she says that the unit in which Sarah Everard's killer Wayne Couzens and the serial rapist David Carrick belong to should be disbanded, and that there should be a fundamental reset, she calls, of stop and search. It all needs a fundamental overhaul. They have 2.5 years before another review. If change is deemed to be too slow, then the Met faces being broken up. She has confidence in the Commissioner, she says, but what she won't like is his refusal to accept the terms institutional racism, sexism and homophobia. She says if they won't accept the terms, how can you trust them to take it seriously?
All right, Sejal, thank you. Next tonight, Boris Johnson has admitted he did mislead Parliament over the Partygate scandal. In a document given to a committee of MPs, the former Prime Minister accepts the House of Commons was misled by statements he made about the lockdown parties at Downing Street, but he insists he didn't do it recklessly or intentionally. It comes ahead of his televised appearance before a panel of MPs tomorrow. Here's our political editor, Robert Peston, on Boris Johnson's defence.
At last, the former Prime Minister is giving his defence to the charge that he lied to MPs about parties in 10 Downing Street.
Do you think you'll be vindicated?
Because although he attended 5 such parties during the pandemic, this is what he told MPs in December 2021.
All guidance was followed completely during number 10. I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken.
In a written statement to the Privileges Committee, which is investigating Boris Johnson's alleged misconduct, he said, "I accept that the House of Commons was misled by my statements that the rules and guidance had been followed completely at number 10. But he insisted that when the statements were made, they were made in good faith. I didn't intentionally or recklessly mislead the House." He said he got it so wrong because, on the basis of assurances I received from those with direct knowledge, I honestly believed that these were lawful work gatherings and, as Prime Minister, I'm reliant on advice from officials. There's nothing reckless or unreasonable about that. Here are the Downing Street parties that took place while the rest of us were banned from having such fun. But Johnson says he had no idea they were wrong and no one told him. Though this former Downing Street advisor, Dominic Cummings, insists he did. Johnson says Cummings is not credible because he went from being friend to arch political enemy. In training for the ordeal, Johnson has raised concerns that the committee has been partisan and unfair. The Cabinet Minister in his own party disagrees.
I have confidence in the Privileges Committee to do that work. It's a cross-party committee. It has a Conservative majority on the committee. It'll produce its report and then it'll be a matter for the House of Commons. It's not a matter for the government.
Inevitably, initial judgment has a political flavour.
Those of us who sat in Parliament and listened to Boris Johnson's explanations, denials, and now see this report, know that he is really taking us all for fools.
The evidence from Boris's submission shows that he didn't deliberately mislead the House of Commons, either recklessly or alternatively.
For the Cabinet meeting today, what happens to their former boss matters, because if he gets a severe punishment, he may have to fight a by-election to keep his seat, a humiliation for the entire Tory party. Robert Peston, ITV News.
Well, our UK editor Paul Brand, of course, helped expose the Downing Street Partygate scandal, and he joins us now. So, Paul, how does Boris Johnson's defence stack up?
Well, he didn't convince the Cabinet Office inquiry or the police investigation, but this is different. This is about whether he misled MPs. So let's take a look at some of the key claims in his submission today. Firstly, the birthday party. Now, this is important, of course, because this is the one event that Boris Johnson was fined for. He says when he was attending events like this, he was so sure that they were within the rules that actually Number 10 briefed the newspapers about this when they told the Times newspaper, which wrote a short article at the time describing how staff ate a Union Jack cake and sang Happy Birthday. But then Boris Johnson says in his evidence today, no cake was eaten, and no one even sang happy birthday. So you start to see the inconsistencies emerging, even if some might argue that's minor. It starts to question some of this submission. Point number 2 is when Partygate then exploded into the public domain off the back of that video with Downing Street staff laughing and joking about a Christmas party. Boris Johnson says today that he asked his aides, look, were any rules broken? What should I say? And he was told by his Director of Communications, Jack Doyle, I think you can say, I've been assured there was no party and no rules were broken. That is what he said to MPs. He says he was just doing what aides told him to do. I think tomorrow the committee, they will point to other evidence, other messages shared between his staff that said things like, I'm struggling to come up with a way this one is in the rules in my head. Boris Johnson says he never saw those messages. And then finally, I think what the committee will ask tomorrow is, does Boris Johnson have a fully functioning pair of eyes? Because when you look at events like this, a leaving party for another member of staff, well, they will say, how could he survey that room and think it was within the rules? He says, well, he was so convinced that he allowed the official photographer to take that photo. But if you then go to the Number 10's official social media accounts, you won't see that photograph posted anywhere. In fact, none of the Partygate pictures were ever posted there. So some might ask, why not? All of this makes for pretty acrimonious evidence tomorrow. I think those who like Boris Johnson will say this is a reminder he can draw a crowd. I think those who don't like Boris Johnson will say he sometimes draws a crowd for the wrong reasons.
Either way, compelling viewing. Paul, thank you. Well, next, the man accused of fatally shooting 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in her Liverpool home has told a court he is a high-level cannabis dealer. Thomas Cashman said he made up to £5,000 a week, selling up to 10 kilograms of the drug. He denies murdering Olivia and other defences. With the day's evidence from Manchester Crown Court, here's Chloe Keedy.
As 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell lay dying, her killer ran away. The prosecution say that man was 34-year-old Thomas Cashman. They claim he fled Kingsheath Avenue by running and jumping through people's back gardens until he reached a friend's house, where they say he changed his clothes. But Thomas Cashman claims he wasn't there that night at all, and today at Manchester Crown Court he began to tell the jury his version of events.
Thomas Cashman told the court that he had changed his clothes at the woman's house, but not on the night of the shooting. He said it had happened weeks earlier, at a time when they were in a sexual relationship. Thomas Cashman's counsel claims she lied to police about his involvement in the shooting because she was angry about how that relationship had ended.
Thomas Cashman told the jury that in August last year he was a high-level cannabis dealer, making between £3,000 and £5,000 a week, money he said he'd spend on cars, bikes and holidays. The prosecution claim Cashman shot Olivia Pratt-Corbell while he was chasing another man called Joseph Nee. But today, Cashman claimed that Joseph Nee was a friend, one he'd spent time with the day before the shooting. He was asked, have you ever had any problems with Joseph Nee or any of his family? He replied, no, I've never had any problems with him or any of his family. They've always been my friends. How were things when you parted company? His lawyer asked, and he said, all good, the same as every other time we see each other. Thomas Cashman denies all the charges against him, and he's expected to continue giving evidence here tomorrow. Chloe Keedy, ITV News, Manchester.
There's plenty more to come on the ITV Evening News, including police in Birmingham make an arrest after this confrontation, which ended in the victim being set on fire. The pothole plague that would cost billions to fix. We're out on the roads to see just how bad it is.
You had to swerve there.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have swerved, that would have been...
Yeah, that would have been burst tyre.
And she's one of the thousands of innocent victims of the war in Ukraine. 6-year-old Marina learned to walk, run and play on her new prosthetic leg. Her ambition and bravery is astounding. That special report coming up at 7. We'll be back in a few moments after the break. Welcome back. President Putin says China's peace plan for Ukraine could be used to end the war, but he said he was yet to see readiness From the other side, it came as Mr. Putin met with China's President Xi in Moscow. The two leaders also discussed growing trade, energy and political ties, as our Asia correspondent Debbie Edward reports.
When you strip back the ceremonial fanfare and the circuitous red carpet, it is a shared hostility towards the West that unites these two presidents. And today they showed they are on the same page when it comes to the war in Ukraine. The Chinese president will claim this a success, getting the Russian president to sign a statement that he is committed to resuming peace talks. But as ever, the devil is in the detail, and both men signed a document which also recognized Moscow's security concerns. In almost the same breath as he talked about peace, Vladimir Putin threatened a response to the UK providing Ukraine with depleted uranium rounds.
It looks like the West indeed intends to fight Russia until the last Ukrainian. Not on words, but on deeds. If that happens, Russia will respond accordingly.
President Xi may have framed this as a peace mission, but it was trade that topped the agenda.
The two sides should strengthen communication and collaborate closely to promote the new and greater development.
The NATO Secretary-General questioned the sincerity of the peace proposals coming out of Moscow and revealed there is evidence Russia has asked Beijing for military aid.
We haven't seen any proof that China is delivering lethal weapons to Russia. But we have seen some signs that this has been a request from Russia.
After appearing in lockstep with Putin, President Xi will find it hard to present himself as a neutral promoter of peace if his next move is indeed a phone call to Ukraine. Debbie Edward, ITV News, Beijing.
Counter-terrorism police are involved in the investigation into the setting alight of a man as he returned home from a mosque. The incident happened in Edgbaston in Birmingham last night. It could be linked to a similar incident in West London last month. Ian Woods has more.
The attack was caught on a security camera. It's been studied by specialist counter-terrorism officers as they try to establish a motive for the crime. The footage shows the victim being stopped in the street by a man who tries to engage him in conversation. After a brief exchange, he attempts to move on, and even though his path is repeatedly blocked, the elderly man continues his walk down the street. Moments later, liquid is sprayed on him and set alight.
He never troubled nobody in his life. Never. Ever since I've known him.
All the community is feeling very bad, and especially we sorry for the families, very upset about it.
Today, the police identified and arrested a man in the area and took him away for questioning. The victim was on his way back from a local mosque, so the West Midlands force is now liaising with police in London over an apparently similar attack on an 82-year-old man last month near a mosque in Ealing. At the time, the Met issued pictures of a man they wanted to question.
We very quickly after the incident made the connection to the incident that happened in the Metropolitan Police area. We're working closely with the Metropolitan Police, reviewing that to establish to what extent those two incidents are linked, and that does very much part of the ongoing inquiry at this time.
The police in the West Midlands are also looking at this footage, which appears to show the victim being followed shortly before he was attacked. He's suffering serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Ian Woods, ITV News.
Mark Goff is outside West Midlands Police headquarters in Birmingham for us this evening. Mark, how is the community feeling tonight?
Yeah, I think it can be described in one word, really. Horrified. They're absolutely horrified at what's happened to this man, who's been described locally as very peaceful and very quiet, because, of course, we don't yet know what the motive is for this attack. On the flip side, the community has responded incredibly. According to one councillor I spoke to earlier, people who have CCTV-enabled doorbells scoured their footage as soon as this had happened to see if there was anything on there which could help the police investigation. Meanwhile, police tonight say they're pleased with how the investigation's going, and any mosque goers should still continue to go and worship, especially with Ramadan approaching, and carry on their behaviour as normal. But they should also still remain vigilant.
right, Mark in Birmingham, thank you. Potholes on roads across England and Wales are getting worse, and there's less money than ever to repair them. Councils say they've only received 2/3 of what they need, a shortfall of £1.3 billion, and it would take 11 years to bring all the roads up to scratch. Here's our consumer editor Chris Choi on the bumpy ride ahead.
Just look at the state of our roads. This isn't off the beaten track, it's Greater Manchester today. As new research shows what drivers have said for years, the potholes are getting worse.
You had to swerve there.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have swerved, that would have been...
Yeah, that would have been burst tyre.
Richard Marsden has had 4 bursts already and mechanical damage thanks to these potholes.
It's more like a slalom.
It is.
You're having to move around.
It is. Cost me over £1,000 in money to have the stuff repaired.
Look at the tyres, the suspension.
Yeah. Eventually somebody will lose their life on this road, and I think it's been chronically underfunded for that, you know, and what do you put the cost on a life?
Here in Altrincham, the council told us it repairs more than 400 potholes a month. Today's research of highways across England and Wales shows the number of potholes filled in the last 12 months has gone down from 1.7 to 1.4 million, while the total cost of the road repairs backlog has gone up, reaching a record £14 billion. The average frequency of resurfacing now stands at once every 116 years.
We're spending far too much money on patching the roads instead of preventative maintenance.
So how can you get a long-standing or even dangerous pothole fixed?
What you do, you can contact your local authority highways department. They have a statutory obligation to maintain the road in a safe condition. Most of them have hotlines where you can report potholes.
Vehicle mechanics say today's figures don't tell the full story. Many, like here, are seeing an upsurge in expensive damage.
We sell more coil springs, wheels, tyres due to damage than we ever have before. It's definitely a significant problem that people are encountering.
Government is investing £5 billion over 5 years into local roads. Financially, the authorities are steering a tricky course. Today's research shows they're not the only ones. Chris Choi, ITV News in Greater Manchester.
It's just gone 7 o'clock. You're watching the ITV Evening News. Here's what's still ahead before Emmerdale. The education world calls for major changes to the Ofsted regime after a head teacher took her own life following the result of one inspection. The policy credited with preventing hundreds of alcohol deaths in Scotland. We'll have all the details as Gwyneth Paltrow appears in court over a skiing crash. The 17th century frieze frozen in time, but how was it discovered inside the walls of this flat in York?
And while we may have blown away the frosts, warnings of strong winds are still to come for parts of the UK tonight. Join me for the full weather forecast coming up a bit later.
But first, the brave Ukrainian girl learning to walk again after losing a leg when Russian forces shelled her home. 6-year-old Marina Ponomaryova is the first child amputee to be treated in Ukraine's capital. It is because medical teams there are seeing so many patients with lost limbs, they are now experts. And with Marina, every step of the way is a dedicated doctor who is helping her physical and mental recovery. Our correspondent Emma Murphy went to meet them both. Here's her special report.
There was a time when keeping her toes from the cold of the tide was the biggest concern for Marina Ponomaryova. When the rain was the only thing to shield from whilst puddle jumping. When her life was filled only with the joys of childhood, not the brutality of war. Now the little girl who ran through puddles is learning to walk again. Learning to walk on a prosthetic leg. A 6-year-old child living with the consequences of an adult war. Marina is the first of Ukraine's child amputees to be treated in Kyiv. Others who lost limbs were sent abroad, but so many have now been injured. Medical teams have learned quickly how to treat and rehabilitate the youngest victims.
My hope is to distract Marina from the war. We smile, we play, and I try to help her forget. Physical rehabilitation depends on a strong mental state.
Marina's life had been one of childhood simplicity until the Russian advance brought the front line to her home. She lost her leg above the knee when a shell hit the house. She played no part in this war, but its impact will now be lifelong.
Sometimes she tells me about the rocket hitting their house. It's so difficult to hear or even believe it could happen here. But at least when she tells me, I know she trusts me.
The work to learn to walk, run and play again is exhausting, but Marina is sustained by the close bond she's built with Dr. Nazar. She giggles about watching herself walk in front of the mirror and then explains what her dream is for the future.
A race car driver? Do you like driving really fast?
She has a plan to achieve that dream. I need to learn to walk quicker and run faster. 10,000 people have lost limbs in this war. At the prosthetics factory in Kyiv, they can no longer keep up with the demand.
The number of injured soldiers is big, and so many civilians have lost arms and legs that the number of limbs we have to make is going up constantly.
One day this war will end, but its scars will be left on the bodies of those who had the misfortune to be caught in its midst, so many of whom had no part in the fight. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Kyiv.
And you can read much more about Marina's story on our website at itv.com/news. Let's get an update on what is making the news tonight. A damning report has said the Metropolitan Police is institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Boris Johnson has said he relied on the advice of officials when he said Number 10 had followed all COVID guidelines, denying he intentionally misled Parliament over Partygate. And US officials have said they'll reject any peace plan proposed by China following a meeting between Presidents Xi and Putin. There have been calls for Ofsted to pause its school inspections after a head teacher took her own life. Ruth Perry killed herself in January as her school was being given the lowest possible rating by England's education watchdog. Unions representing teachers want inspections stopped for this week, and individual schools are considering their own action. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Sarah Corker.
I'm very privileged to have been the head for the last 11 years, and I'm particularly proud of the fact that I'm a product of the school.
Teaching was Ruth Perry's passion and vocation for more than 3 decades, described as a dedicated, hard-working and popular teacher. In November, an Ofsted report downgraded her school in Reading from outstanding to inadequate, reaching conclusions that her family said were sensationalist and drawn from scant evidence. In January, she took her own life. In a statement, the family said, "We are in no doubt that Ruth's death was a direct result of the pressure put on her by the process and outcome of an inspection. We do not for an instant recognise Ofsted's inadequate judgment as a true reflection of Ruth's exemplary leadership." 3 education unions have now called for an immediate halt to inspections.
We think it's time just to look at Ofsted and the way it works, to make it more proportionate and to get rid of the idea that you can take something as complex as a school or a college and to reduce it to a single word with all of the consequences of that.
Ofsted exists to improve the education system and to maintain standards and safety in our schools. But for some head teachers, just the word Ofsted invokes feelings of fear and anger, and the inspection regime can be a distressing experience. This Halifax primary went from outstanding to requires improvement in 2019, a judgment that's had a lasting impact on a school serving an area with high levels of deprivation.
For me, I was devastated. I thought it was unfair, unjust. It caused many nights, sleepless nights. This one size, this is what we're judging, just doesn't work. And I think that Ofsted inspectors need to be trained a little bit better in understanding the complexities of school communities.
Others, though, including the Department for Education and a former head of Ofsted, argue the grading system has raised standards for decades.
Ofsted has made a remarkable difference to the lives of children and young people. They now have a much better chance of a decent education, a good education than ever before.
A petition calling for an inquiry into the inspection at Ruth Perry School has already hit more than 100,000 signatures. An inquest this summer will fully investigate her death, but this tragedy has shone a spotlight on a system many feel is deeply flawed. Sarah Corker, ITV News.
Some other news now. Derby has been unveiled as the host city of Great British Railway's new headquarters. Transport Secretary Mark Harper said the new public body will remove blame culture in the rail industry. The body will own the rail infrastructure, oversee reforms and set most fares and timetables. Just Eat has announced it plans to cut around 1,700 delivery driver jobs and 170 head office jobs after a slowdown in demand for takeaways. It says the cuts are part of an overhaul of its operations as it seeks to reduce costs. John Moss, the drummer and founding member of band Culture Club, will be paid almost £2 million by his former bandmates Boy George, Roy Hay and Michael Craig after a legal battle over the group's profits was resolved a week before going to trial. More than 400 lives may have been saved by Scotland introducing minimum alcohol pricing. Research has linked the policy to a 13% drop in deaths since it started in May 2018. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says it's one of her proudest achievements. Here's our Scotland reporter, Louise Scott.
Jarden Simpson runs the Scottish Recovery Consortium in Glasgow, helping people to recover from addiction. But he also has lived experience of the devastating effects of alcohol.
I was dependent on alcohol for 15 years, and that led to the breakdown of my marriage. I then went on to becoming involved in criminality.
Jarden's been in recovery for 15 years. Measures such as minimum unit pricing are policies he believes are helping to change attitudes and habits towards alcohol.
Minimum unit pricing would have affected me. Would it have altered my substance use? Probably not, because I was dependent. However, as a whole population approach, I believe has been proven effective in getting the whole population to take a more considered approach.
Now a study has shown it's prevented on average 156 alcohol deaths in Scotland each year, predominantly in more deprived areas. The legislation implemented a minimum price of 50p per alcohol unit. That meant a 2 litre of cider increased to £5 and a 75cl of an Alcopop is now £10. That's almost double the original price. The aim to target the heaviest drinkers who would look for the highest alcohol content at the lowest price.
13% is a relative compared to England, where they don't have MUP. In fact, over the last 2 years, as a result of drinking habits changing in COVID, the actual exact number of deaths has risen. So we're talking about a less severe rise rather than an actual fall.
There's still a long way to go to reduce alcohol deaths in Scotland and improve the culture that surrounds it. But campaigners say these results prove the policy should stay and be implemented across the UK. Louise Scott, ITV News, Glasgow.
Hollywood star Gwyneth Paltrow's latest appearance in front of the cameras was for a real-life court case. She's accused of skiing so recklessly at a resort in Utah that she left a man seriously hurt. The 50-year-old star of Shakespeare in Love is countersuing, claiming the man is overstating his injuries and trying to exploit her celebrity status. Ellie Pitt reports.
7 years after they collided on a ski slope in Utah, Gwyneth Paltrow walked into a court to face the man attempting to sue her for more than £2.5 million in damages. The actress's laughter at the start of the trial was short-lived when Terry Sanderson's version of events were presented to the court.
And her conscious disregard for other people on the mountain all combined together to cause Terry Sanderson to suffer 4 broken ribs and permanent brain damage.
Miss Paltrow had been holidaying at a luxury resort in 2016 with her family when the crash took place. The jury was told that she was reckless when she blindly travelled down a mountain looking back up it as she hit Mr. Sanderson, who, being further down the slope, had right of way. But that is not how the Oscar winner recalled that February morning.
Suddenly she sees 2 skis appear between her skis, and a man comes up right behind her. He comes up almost body to body like this and starts groaning.
Gwyneth Paltrow found fame through roles in the films Shakespeare in Love and Sliding Doors. But 15 years ago, she started to swap Hollywood for lifestyle and beauty influencing, where she has become a controversial figure in the world of wellness. Now it's her actions away from work that are facing scrutiny. She is countersuing Mr. Sanderson, seen here on the far left, for $1 in damages. The trial in Utah continues. Ellie Pitt, ITV News. Still to come on the ITV Evening News. One man's retro redecoration as 400-year-old paintings are discovered in the walls of a flat in York.
And warnings of strong winds brewing in Scotland. We'll have the details and the forecast shortly.
Plus, the unique method of baking being pioneered by scientists in the US. It won't win Bake Off, but we'll tell you exactly what was being cooked up there after this short break. Welcome back. Now, before the break, we showed you what appeared to be a printer baking a cake. And that is exactly what it was. This cheesecake-like dessert was cooked up in a 3D printer at Columbia University. It's made of 7 ingredients, including Nutella, banana puree, strawberry jam and peanut butter. It is completely edible and could revolutionise how food is processed, helping people control exactly how much nutrition goes into their food. Well, from cakes to weather, and it is March, so we should expect it to be windy, and there are warnings in place for some pretty strong gusts in Scotland tomorrow. And Alex is here to tell us more.
Yes, it's going to be fairly unsettled as we head through the next 24 hours or so. In fact, the Met Office earlier today took a look at the situation and decided to issue a wind warning across much of Scotland, and that kicks in at 4 o'clock on Wednesday morning until 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Now, quite widely, we're looking at gusts of between 50 to 60 miles per hour, even inland and up over higher routes. But out towards exposed western coast in particular, we could see gusts touching around 75 miles per hour. Of course, all of this is strong enough to cause some disruption. In fact, Network Rail Scotland have already put some provisions in place. So along some of their coastal routes, some services will be running slightly slower. And that's because the strong winds will be combined with a pretty high tide tomorrow morning. And also they're putting extra staff out with chainsaws just in case there is any debris or trees fallen onto the tracks. Well, let's take a look at how this is all happening. And if we take a look at our pressure pattern setup as we head through to Thursday, you can see we get bombarded with a number of areas of low pressure, fairly tightly packed isobar, so the wind's picking up. And I know that wind warning is in place across Scotland tonight, but I think everywhere it is going to be a fairly breezy night to come. So as I say, do travel carefully tomorrow, particularly in Scotland. Perhaps do check before you travel. Right, let's take a look at the weather picture for the whole of Britain over the next few days.
Not everywhere will be cold today. Some places will be warm and toasty. Heinz Beans sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, certainly do keep your brolly handy as we head through the next 24 hours. There's going to be rain at times over the next few days anyway. Quite windy conditions, as I've mentioned before, but temperatures are actually quite mild. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere tomorrow afternoon, more so in the south, probably touch 17 degrees Celsius, but we'll keep you posted on that. Now, as we run the sequence for this evening and overnight, you can see we are going to be dealing with this fairly extensive band of rain, which is going to be sweeping its way across the country eastwards. Some breaks developing behind, but also a few showers. And as I say, that wind warning does kick into place at around 4 o'clock on Wednesday morning. So do watch out for that. But as I say, a breezy night all round. No trouble with our temperatures. In fact, some parts certainly holding up in double digits. Now, as we start tomorrow, as that rain clears off into the North Sea, we're going to be left with probably a good deal of sunshine, but it will be relatively short-lived. We get more showers coming in during the afternoon. Not to say that we won't see more spells of sunshine hanging around as we head in, but you will have to watch out for a shower or two. Temperatures on the face of it, not too bad, but once we factor in the wind, it will be feeling a fair bit chillier, particularly across Scotland. As I say, gusts on exposed coastal roads could touch around 75 miles per hour. Temperature-wise, as I say, a bit fresher in the wind, but 16, maybe 17 degrees Celsius out towards the southeast tomorrow afternoon. As for Thursday, well, we are into a fairly showery regime, and that kind of paints a picture really for the rest of the week as we creep into the weekend. So a real mix of sunshine and showers as we head through into Saturday.
Heinz Beans sponsors ITV National Weather.
So that's how it's looking this evening. As I say, that wind warning very much in place across Scotland. So as I say, check before you travel tomorrow morning. There could be some disruption.
All right, Alex, thank you. And finally tonight, home renovations can often unearth something unusual from the past, usually though it's some shoddy DIY by a previous owner. But when Luke Budworth was having his kitchen redone in York, he couldn't quite believe his eyes at what was uncovered, as our North of England reporter Sangeeta Lal explains.
With home decor, there's no denying the old styles often come back into fashion. But this takes retro to another level. Paintings like this were all the rage in the 1600s, and after uncovering it, Luke Budworth says history has never looked so good.
How did you feel when you saw that?
Just very excited, a bit like uncovering a treasure or something like that. As I eat my toast, I can just see it staring at me as I work at my desk. It's just above me. It's just surreal, but it's a constant reminder that I live in such a historic city.
What's so unique about this find isn't just the quality of the painting, but what it depicts. The pictures are based on a book called Emblems, published in 1635, which shows what people here were reading 400 years ago. It also shows these buildings might be older than they look.
What's so interesting about this is until now historians believed that these buildings were constructed in the 18th century, but this painting dates back well before then, changing their understanding of how this part of York was built. But also it could mean there are more secret paintings hidden beneath just a few inches of plaster along any of these walls.
For historians, though, the concern isn't about how many might still be hidden, but how the paintings that are uncovered can be preserved.
They can't be left just exposed to the air for various reasons. The changes in humidity, temperature, exposure to direct sunlight will cause them to degrade far more quickly than they have done.
Something Luke is trying to prevent, who moved to the city because he wanted to be closer to its history, and it doesn't get much closer than this. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News, York.
Oh, talk about adding value. That is all for now. Julie is here with news at 10, but from me and the evening news team, bye-bye. Have a great evening.